everyone, I'm John Webb, and this is the first in a series of Mean.io tutorials. The tutorial series is aimed towards new users of Mean.io to help everybody get on board and up and running and familiar with some of the core concepts in Mean.io. In this video, we'll be talking about some prerequisites, getting Mean.io installed and getting it up and running. So let's get into it. I have up here learnmean.io. This documentation was made a while ago. Some things may be out of date. I'll try to call out any things that are. Getting documentation updated is something that we would love help on, but step one is getting people using stuff, so that's why the video tutorial is getting started. We've had a lot of questions about how to get things going, so here we go. Depending on your operating system that you're using, obviously things are slightly different. I'm using Windows here. I've already got stuff installed, but the basics are you need to get Node.js installed. Right now, as of this video, the current version is 4.2.2. Mean.io hasn't been extensively tested on Node 4.0, but we've had people using it and it seemed to work in general. The version that it's actually tested on and supported is 0.1 or 0.10 rather. It's been used a lot on 0.12 as well, but you should be okay installing 4.2.2 or the latest. It has a lot of dependencies, and that's where problems tend to come in, but most of them seem to be updated and working currently. In addition, you also need MongoDB up and running. There's various tutorials on how to get it up and running, and also running as a service on Windows, running on boot on OS X or Ubuntu or other operating systems. You just look those up. It's going to be different per operating system. Once you've got Node installed, npm comes packaged with it, so you'll have various versions of that. Right now I have Node 4.2.2 and npm version 2.14.7. Great. So in addition to those, we've got to install some things globally with npm, gulp and bower, and the mean CLI. So you can just install all those guys together with mean CLI, bower, gulp. I already have these installed, but this is the command to install them. You can also update them. I can make sure they're updated. We'll let it get started and we'll skip ahead here if it takes too long. Actually, while that's installing, let's see what else we've got here. By default, Node runs on port 3000, and the documentation tells you how you can change that port. On Windows, you can change environment variables instead of using export. It's also changeable in the configuration files. So when installing, I get a lot of nasty red stuff here. There's some things I believe I don't have some standard libraries installed, so Visual Studio doesn't know how to find some of this stuff. A lot of these things are more standard on OS X and Ubuntu. What's actually failing here isn't that big a deal, but if you have those standard libraries, you probably won't have any of this. So that's the globals installed, the mean CLI, bower, and gulp. So from there, now you have the mean CLI installed. You can that gives you this mean command that you can run. Help gives you lots of interesting stuff. We won't be doing much of this. We'll just be going into init right now. So what init does is it clones down the current mean repository from GitHub and runs some installation stuff for you. So this is the mean repository. It's Linovate mean. There's also mean.io and mean CLI. The CLI is what we just installed globally, which has these commands. Mean.io is, we'll get into it later, but it's a core library that's actually a dependency of mean. And then mean is actually what we'll mainly be concerned with. So to create our first app, you can mean init my app or anything. This is just gonna start the launcher. We'll just use some defaults here. It's if you add the if you add the name, it's gonna default it in there. And oh, it already exists. My fault. I was actually deleting it earlier, and it paused. Let's give it a different name. I won't worry about that for now. My mean app. Alright. So it's going to clone down, ask me some questions. It allows you to create your first admin user. You can hit yes and put in some options here. I actually already have a collection with a user in it, so I'm not going to worry about it. If you type yes, you can put in an email and a password, and it's going to add that user to your default database in Mongo. I believe it's mean-dev is the name of the database. It'll add it in there, and you'll be able to log in as that user. So we created it. We can pop right in there, my mean app. You can see what's in here. Step 1 is to npm install once you're in here. Now the documentation states that you should npm install and then bower install. You should also make sure all your stuff's updated. Also, as a prerequisite here, on Windows, you'll want to have Python 2.7 installed and some version of Visual Studio. Currently, there's 2015. There's free versions floating around on there. You can just install it, and you need to make sure Git is also installed, or else this stuff will fail. So Git, Python, and some kind of compiler. So on other systems other than Windows, Python, I believe, and like a GCC or something's probably already there. For Python, you also need to add it to, if you're on Windows, you need to add it to your environment variables. So you can, let's see here, go to your environment variables, and you need to name it Python, I believe. So here, I've got ldev Python 27 or 2.7 python.exe. So Python needs to point straight to the exe, or else node gyp won't. It'll have problems. So make sure those things are done if you're on Windows. I know not too many people do web dev on Windows compared to Ubuntu or OS X, so you might not have to do a lot of this depending on your platform. Alright, now it's bower installing. Goes a lot quicker. Nothing to actually compile in here, or to fail compiling in my case. And what it's doing here actually is it's cascading through packages in mean, and as we'll get into it later, but essentially mean.io is built with various packages, and each package can have its own package.json file for npm packages, bower.json file for bower packages, and it's going to cascade through all the npms and installing all of those, and then inside of there, for the most part, those package.jsons that npm uses are going to have post-install steps to bower.json, so you're going to get your npms and your bowers installed per package. That's how you deal with your dependencies internally inside the packages without having to add these high-level dependencies. So now that all of this is installed, we can see we have our bower registry stuff, our node modules folder, etc. So we should be all set. One way you can test it out is by running the test command, npm test. This will actually fire up the server, run some Mocha tests. It's also set up to run karma tests. There's one sort of benign karma test that exists just to, it just serves as an example to show people how you can have front-end tests running. The Mocha test, for the most part, tests things on the Express side, and Karma will test things on the Angular side. So this ran through and tested a whole bunch of various tests that are built in. They all passed, and our one little benign karma test passed. So now you can run it, and you can just, we installed gulp globally earlier, and let me just hit gulp. It's defaultly on port 3000. You can change that as documentation says, by changing an environment variable of port. You can also dive into the config, which, let's just peek at that real quick. I'll open up this new project. Let's see. Let's find it. ldev my mean app. Oh, come on, refresh. My mean app, okay. So this is the environment, this config, and these have different configurations for different environments. So development, production, test, all is used first. The others are kind of aggregated into it. You can see the HTTP port here. It basically looks and checks to see if there is an environment variable called port, and it'll use that. If it doesn't exist, it'll use 3000. So you could just change it here. It's no big deal. That's going to change your default port if you don't have one set. You can change that to whatever you want. One thing to note is if you're on Ubuntu or some Unix system, if you try to bind to port, I believe 1024 or lower, you need to be root. So you have to run sudo to be able to bind to those ports. So if you try to bind to port 80, you need to be running as root. So it goes through, Gulp runs a whole bunch of stuff. It adds a watcher, debug listener, etc., and then it finally loads up mean app started on port 3000. So let's see here. Let's localhost 3000, and here we are. This is the default mean app, and everything's working. If you created a user, you can log in as that user. Created an admin user for earlier in the process. If you do log in as admin, you'll see this admin bar over here. If you didn't create an admin user, you can click join and you can sign, you can fill all this stuff out. This is blank because we don't have, this area would have some social sign-in stuff, which is all disabled by default. It's easy to enable and config. So that's it. Once you're at this point and everything is up and running, you're ready to get started with further stuff like customizing and branding, which will be in the next tutorial. Getting rid of all of this and making it look more like you want it to look. If you have any questions, if there's any problems here, you can always hop over to the Gitter chat. If you go to the repository, you can click here. If you're in the documentation, it's at the top. You click that, it'll open up Gitter chat, and you'll see lots of people having conversations. I'm in here a lot, and so are lots of other helpful people. Feel free to ask questions. People have probably asked the same question, and those people can help answer. See you guys around.